event, the release of the 5th issue of AROOP, a non-periodical journal which the Raza Foundation publishes. Originally, when we had thought of publishing it, we had called it Extraction. And the Raza said, no, this is not good. Call it by some Hindi name. So several names came up and finally he approved this. We did quite realize that non-periodical is going to be not even once a year. So it is incredibly non-periodical in that sense. And the first issue was edited by me because I could locate anybody else. And then, luckily, I started spotting and catching friends to do it. So this second and third issues, this one was the one which I edited, which was the first one. And the two others were edited by Nancy Agazania from Bombay. Some things that only art can do. And the second one.
This one.
Okay, so this one, yeah. Totems and taboos. And then Ananya Vajpeyi came into the guest editor for the two now. And this is the second which is now finishing. So the first one, we discussed what to do and then we got upon two themes, failure and future. So first one was on failure. This is the one on failure, also guest edited by her. And this is the second one, which is on future. And the most remarkable symbol of future at the moment in Delhi is going to be the central vista. So the issue really is focused on central vista. And we have as many as 18 contributors, some of whom are luckily here to speak this evening. And they are Ruchir Joshi, Prem Chandavarkar, Narayan Murthy, Pradeep Krishnan, Supriya Gandhi, Naman Ahuja, Kavita Singh, Mukul Keshwan, Alpana Kishore, Atul Dev, Madhav Raman, Raj Bhatkal, A.G.K. Menon, Namina Haider, Haikal, Riaz Tayyabji, Jawhar Sircar, Vivek Gupta. And if I just tell you some of the titles, you will understand the kind of content that has. The first one is far removed from reality. Second is after the fire. Unraveling the Central Vista project. Replanting Central Vista. Open letter. A halt to New Delhi's demolition. When toppling monuments serves authoritarian ends. Make do and mend. Culture increasingly fractured and unplanned. Figure it out. Bit by bit, trick by trick. This is the title of Alpana Kishore, who's going to talk this evening also. Modi's folly. Symbols of the state. The Central Vista shakedown. Why the development of Central Vista is not a public good. Uncertain fate. Architectures of banality. Correspondence with the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, which Jawhar Sircar has, a member of the Rajya Sabha, has indulged in a manner speaking. So, this is an issue which is very timely because we are in a time where demolition has become the metaphor of our times, bulldozing and demolishing and replacing and breaking. In fact, I recently wrote a piece in Hindi in which I used 15 verbs which have become now the, in a manner of speaking, the verbs which are used in public discourse. Marna, chillana, patakna, chikhna, etc. There are 15 verbs in Hindi which have become. Anyway, let's not go into that. So here we are very thankful, and I must say that Ananya Vajpeyi had put together, and incidentally all Vajpayis are not necessarily related. And all of them suffer from a sense of arrogance. However, some are talented. Now she is the one who's talented. I am the one who suffers from some sense of arrogance. So that's a genetic problem. So she put together all this, and there were problems of all kinds, including, so they all. But now I must also mention that not only that it has been guest edited by her and has been designed by Bharti Shah, and the cover is by Divan Sundar. And I think the cover, as you would see, perhaps some of you might have seen, is a remarkable statement by itself. Therefore, it also tells what the issue contains in terms of more substantial material. So before that, and before I ask Ananya to speak a few things, incidentally, Ananya is the daughter of my friend, Kailash Vajpeyi, who was a fellow poet and who died in Australia. And for many years, many people used to mention her as my daughter, or ask me, is Ananya your daughter? So after Kailash passed away, I told her, you better now become my daughter, because I can't keep on disclaiming. Second thing is that her mother was my classmate, and that is the other connection, besides being part of the same clan of the arrogant Professor Ashish Nandi has very kindly agreed to release the issue. So may I request all of you to come down, and also Ashish down. So that
usual practice of all of them standing with the book.
It's a lovely jacket.
Yes.
Yes.
All of them have been very
Yes.
beautifully produced. The entire series.
thank you.
Raza Foundation has created markets.
Sorry. Good. Then I'll just wrap around you.
Bit by bit and bit by bit.
Good evening, friends, and thank you all for being here this evening. Which may or may not eventually count as a risky venture. It's my very pleasant duty to welcome you and to conduct this evening's program about what is in fact not a very pleasant subject at all, unfortunately, which is the title of this issue of AROOP is Future. And there's a story to this to this title. I was asked by the Raza Foundation to edit 2 issues. And when I proposed the title for the first issue, it was Failure. And Ashokji felt that it was a bit negative, although I had my reasons to suggest that title. That issue came out in 2020 during the pandemic. And he said we needed a more hopeful title for the next one, and that's why we came to Future. But for various reasons, this issue became about the future of our city, of Delhi, of the capital of India. And I was part of a conversation with a large number of fellow citizens, many of whom are architects, town planners, conservationists, art historians, lawyers, scholars, writers, journalists, and over a period of time, our conversation, which was about the Central Vista redevelopment in Delhi, took many forms. It remained a conversation within a group, but there was also some cases filed in courts. There were articles written in newspapers. There were signature campaigns and public campaigns of various kinds, where we tried to put forth our concerns as regards this whole project. And eventually, it was decided that we would try and create an archive of these efforts, even as, in a sense, our efforts were failing once again, to stop this project from going forward. Because in the time that we undertook to make this a public issue, the new parliament was inaugurated. The Central Vista itself was re-landscaped. The Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts was demolished. And things will probably continue in this way for the foreseeable future. We had many concerns, quite apart from the historic character of the city, which we felt was going to be changed in a somewhat arbitrary fashion. We had concerns about public space and the access that common people and ordinary citizens would have to the heart of their city. We had environmental and ecological concerns about sustainability. We had aesthetic concerns, which matter more or less depending on where you're coming from, but they certainly matter to a number of our participants in this conversation. And there were other views that we constantly encountered in the public sphere, including the fact that any city has to change and has to adapt and has to grow. There has to be modernization, there has to be greater efficiency. Delhi is not what it was 100 years ago. It's not what it was when it became the capital or when it was built as the new capital of British India. To some extent, we were often made to feel that our concerns were in bad faith, that we were not somehow moving with the times, or that we were opposing something because of ideological convictions or because of our insistence that that any change can only be dangerous or can only be for the worse. But the most difficult question I felt that we had a lot of trouble with, which was generally an ethical problem, I think, was the question of decolonization. And this is, where we had to think the hardest, because in a sense, the line was that, after all, we are making changes to structures, to a part of the city, to a certain sector of the capital that was initially built by the colonial power as the capital of British India and not for Indian citizens, and not in the context of a free country. And so it's high time that these structures were removed and that India came into its own, etc. Surely it's been long enough for us to move on from that phase of our history. And we really had to look within and ask ourselves, are we just defending colonial Delhi? Is that what this conversation is about, or this campaign is about? And I think you could start by saying yes and no, in the sense that it's true that this was literally designed and built before independence, and it was meant to last. It was not actually built with the idea that within a few years of this new Delhi being built, the British would actually leave as the rulers of India. But I think it became clear to us, at least, that what we were invested in was and is the capital of a new independent nation, and more importantly of a secular democracy and a constitutional republic. And that the way in which we experienced and we saw and we lived amongst these buildings, on these roads, in this part of the country, was as a part of our history that belongs to us and that we genuinely made our own over many, many generations since independence and partition and decolonization. So this is not anymore a colonial city, and its colonial history has become one in a series of many historical phases that this city has gone through, and that is reflected overall in the palimpsest of its architecture and its layout and its many layers of time and of historical memories and of different cultures that remain imprinted in and that continue to live in a sense all around us. What we were concerned with was the future of, and this is where future comes in, cultural institutions which are post-colonial cultural institutions, like the National Archives of India, the National Museum, the National Center for the Arts, the India Gate lawns where people have traditionally gathered for celebration and for protest, the Rajpath lawns, which is up and down Rajpath up to Vijay Chowk, going up the Raisina Hill, which is where the Republic Day parade takes place every year. The Mughal gardens inside the presidential estate, the Parliament building itself, which is the heart of our democratic process and has been since independence. And this is something which one of my colleagues who will speak today pointed out to me, the symbolic intersection of Rajpath and Janpath, and the creation of a cultural quarter around that, with many institutions positioned around that intersection. This is something that all of us agreed needs not just preservation, but it needs to remain a living part of our experience of our capital, a capital of independent India, once again I stress, and it should be passed on as a historical legacy for future generations. So, in other words, decolonization, the argument of decolonization to my mind does not really cut any ice as a rationale for completely erasing a certain part of the city and rebuilding it in whatever way is proposed. So I think during the years of the pandemic, when we were having this conversation and it was not necessarily possible for us to meet in person and so on, we did sometimes have the fear that we'd be thought of as simply being unthinkingly against whatever it is that was being proposed by the ruling dispensation, or that we were being anti-nationals. But I feel that it is precisely as concerned citizens, perhaps even as very patriotic ones, and Ashish Da has always made the distinction between nationalism and patriotism, so I'm using the word patriotic here, that not only do we have every right, it is also in fact our duty as concerned and involved and engaged citizens to speak up for our country, for our capital, for our city, for our constitution, for our institutions, and for our heritage. And that is what we have tried to do through this document, which includes historic photographs, letters that we wrote, articles that we published, and really a kind of a record of a time when increasingly citizens can be made to feel that they are not being heard, or that what they're saying is not only not justified, but that really they ought not say it if they know what's good for them. And that was something that none of us, I think, found to be an acceptable way to live in a democracy, no matter what the future. So it's my very pleasant duty to thank the Raza Foundation, Ashok Vajpeyi, Sanjeev Chaubey, and many others in the team, in the office, to thank the person who has given this book the weight and the beauty that it has, who is Parthiv Shah, my dear friend and a brilliant designer, and his entire team at his office at CMAC. I need to especially thank Geeta Kapoor, who made available to us this beautiful, it's a photograph of an installation of an artwork by Vivan Sundaram. It's called a memorial, and it was actually shown after he passed last year at the Tate Modern. It has its own interesting story and its own history. It was actually made soon after the demolition of the Babri Masjid, and has had many iterations since then. But what actually appealed to us so much about this image is that from a distance, it looks a bit like the India Gate, standing at the intersection of Rajpath and Janpath. And of course, its very resonant name, Memorial, stands as an important counterpoint to his future. I need to thank A.G.K. Menon, who will speak very shortly, for helping me get in touch with many members of Edwin Lutyens' family, who then made a lot of original photographs available to us free of cost to publish in this book, from the time when the Central Vista buildings and landscaping was just being done. So you can see it before it was created, and now of course we will see it after it has disappeared into the past. I need to thank Devika Daulat Singh, who runs Photo Inc. Is a good friend, and she made available to us also some very historic rare photographs by Madan Mahatta and by Raghu Rai. I need to thank the Delhi Art Gallery Archives who provided again maps and cartographic images from the making of the Central Vista, which they had in their possession. Vivek Gupta and Supriya Gandhi, both young scholars who are not here. One is in England and the other is at Yale. The three of us together drafted a letter originally, which was published everywhere and which garnered some 5,000 signatures, calling a halt to the Central Vista when it was first announced. Of course, Jawhar Sircar, an MP, a scholar, a bureaucrat, for raising a ruckus in Parliament, using his position in Parliament to keep this issue on, not on the back burner, but really front and center, and on everyone's minds to whatever extent he possibly could, and he'll tell us a bit about that. I want to say that we had a loose and large group, as I said, of people in conversation on email, sometimes through other channels as well. Many of them overseas, but we lost 3 of our key members last year, and it was really, I mean, it's a blow from which there is no recovering in some sense. We lost Vivan Sundaram, we lost Kavita Singh, and we lost B.N. Goswami. It was a terrible year in that sense, and I'm sorry that it was only after all of them were gone that we were actually able to put this publication together. Vivan, of course, is on the cover. Kavita had an article about the National Museum that she had published that is included in the volume, and Professor B.N. Goswami actually rang me just a few days before he died, saying how worried he was about the National Museum, the moving of the National Museum, and what could we possibly do, and he really wanted that somehow through this group we convey the seriousness of whatever planning or lack of planning seemed to be on the cards as regards taking down the current building and creating a new one. So our speakers for the evening are, of course, in front of us, but we unexpectedly were able to bring 2 other members of our campaign who have been absolutely central to our efforts, and they didn't think they could come, but they're both here, so I'm going to invite them as well to say a few words. Let me start with Naman Ahuja, distinguished art historian, professor at JNU, editor of Marg, my dear friend, very hard to catch, and an active, or I would say leading participant in this long public conversation about the Central Vista. He is the one who has educated all of us as to what is at stake and what we need to do. So first and foremost, I will ask Naman just to say whatever it is that he would like us to hear, and then we'll proceed from there. Thank you so much.
Good evening, friends. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ananya. It was a Herculean effort that you put in over the past few years to keep us all going, in your email thread that compiled all our conversations that we were all having as concerned citizens over the past 5 years. And to be able to create the archive that you did was something truly important, and I'm very, very grateful to the Raza Foundation to have had the foresight to be able to bring it out as a publication. Thank you very much. I think many of us have had these complaints and have these concerns, not ever since this current government has been in power, but actually we've been battling these issues for the past 15, 20 years and have been raising these issues in different forums, and all was not rosy earlier either. But things have catapulted and exacerbated to a point that now it became difficult to even commandeer solidarities amongst the intellectual fraternity because of the degree of censorship that we began to face collectively. Articles were being written by us as we rallied support, but they were being turned down by the press, and then we each had to help each other somehow to be able to get them visibility and seen, and I thank you very much, Ananya, for that too, because I think that hasn't been easy. What does a national museum mean, and what kind of objects does it contain, and what should those objects be able to communicate to the nation, is something that my colleague Kavita Singh and I used to talk about, and we've each published on this subject in different ways at different places, and spoken about it in different parts of the world. It was with these concerns and with a certain group of professional solidarity, again I should say, that in 2011-2012 I had the opportunity to be able to go through 50 different museums in the country and put together the body in Indian art and saw the state of our reserve collections and what was not being shown to the public and why, what was being censored, what aspects of our narrative and evidence was being kept concealed from the public. And it became necessary to be able to, in the exhibition on the body in Indian art, to use the National Museum to be able to tell a very different kind of narrative across its entire first floor. And that brought home our unpreparedness in terms of curatorial concerns and conservation status of our objects and the precarious nature with which we were holding on to our national treasures, which are our collective. You know, the National Museum is like sort of not, the joke used to always be that, you know, it's not in this age of sloganeering, Twitter sloganeering, it's not your mother's locker, it's Bharat Mata's locker, right? And it contains the treasures of the nation. So surely, as all of us with keys to that locker should have a little bit more respect for what is contained in that locker. And it was with these complaints that I know that Jawhar Sircar was extremely helpful and sympathetic at various occasions. And when the run-up to that exhibition was happening, this was really seen as an opportunity to be able to try and create a sort of a flash intervention in the National Museum by 2012-2013. But there's another little history personally, which was that in 2016, Arthur Mittal and I were invited to, by the Office of the President of India, to look at the entire history of the politics behind the creation of and the maintenance of the Rashtrapati Bhavan and its allied buildings by Lachchandsen Baker. And what were the kind of public arguments that went on between 1911 to the early 1970s. And we were able to go through various questions in Parliament and various records of the Rashtrapati Bhavan to see how delicately the narrative had been carefully transformed into what we now call a decolonizing narrative. And how exercised bureaucrats and politicians were, especially in the period between 1946 to the early 1970s, in transforming these buildings and making them into something that were national buildings, and not as symbols of the imperial power, but actually symbols of India. And that required a lot of work. And there were huge debates on what should constitute that national identity. And so to see it, as you're saying, Ananya, suddenly being commandeered as a narrative for decolonization that is becoming urgent suddenly now is actually a bit rich, because these were conversations that were truly being debated at the highest levels for many decades. I think the decolonizing narrative, as you very rightly said, is not one that is something that we have confronted today, but has been a part of our agenda intellectually for many, many decades. And as one has been leading that and finding what should be the Indian response to an expression of a narrative for decolonization, we need to also ask how are we going to preserve the evidence that will allow us to tell that story. And so the first piece that I wrote, which was on culture increasingly fractured, was a piece that came out after no small amount of difficulty in the Indian press as an op-ed, and now has got its second iteration here in this volume. It managed to raise certain key points about the technical aspects that need to be borne in mind when thinking about a national museum and its relocation. But the second was a more polemical piece, which was called Make, Do and Mend, which is in this volume. And it comes out of a certain larger complaint or concern that I have with our public perception. We end up celebrating those who lay a foundation stone. We always end up celebrating the people who inaugurate a building, but we never do anything to celebrate those who maintain an order, maintain a building, maintain an urban vision, maintain a narrative for a nation, which has a very long precedent and a long history in our own texts for conservation. There is a long-standing Sanskrit term called Jirnodhar, which is inscribed in stone at many monuments in India, where it was the maintainers of those buildings that are celebrated. So it's not just textbooks do a great disservice by only saying that Raja Chola built the Thanjavur Brihadishwara temple. But for the 1,000 years that that temple actually ended up standing there was not thanks to his foundations that he laid, but all those people who maintained it, which included subsequent Chola kings, their governors, the Nayakas, the Marathas, and then finally the redress and the conservation that came in after what had happened to it in colonial times. So I think buildings do need to be celebrated, and visions and narratives do need to be, those who protect narratives and buildings also need to be celebrated. And if we can recalibrate our approach to this, perhaps it will not be the kind of TRPs and public adulation that laying and reforming through foundation stones is given, but also maintainers of visions will also be given that kind of respect, perhaps. So those were the concerns with which I wrote the pieces I did. Thank you very much.
Chalenge? Does it work? Can you hear?
Yeah.
In fact, Naman, I just remembered that one of the things that Professor Goswami said to me when he called me that last time was that he was there. He saw the artifacts from England being received at the Rashtrapati Bhavan, and he remembers when they first arrived and were unpacked, and the kind of excitement that that moment held. And he said to me, you know, some of us are old enough to remember that, and the idea that you can simply pack them up and move them somewhere seems completely preposterous. I'm very worried about this, he said. Okay, so now I think we should continue with our program as announced, and I'll invite A.G.K. Menon, who's been a leading light in many of these efforts, to please say a few words.
Is it okay?
Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me here. And congratulations for bringing out this publication, because if you remember, one of the things we said was, if you failed in not having the redevelopment the way we wanted, at least you've resisted, and the resistance is published and is now available for everyone to understand that not everyone acquiesced to the project, not everyone agrees to what has happened. So thank you for calling me, and I have a bit of a difficulty here because all experts here are all going to talk about the same thing, and I'm wondering what do I talk about. And I was thinking I'd be the last because I was the last amongst the last people who wrote, so I thought I'd be asked. And I'd be talking about a sort of a summing up. But I'm the first, and I have to say something. But in a way, Raman has helped me here because he's brought several professional issues to the fore, and that is in fact my focus, because while we have had a tremendous amount of discussions on the physicality of the development that took place, the politics of the development that took place, and the sheer venality of the whole project, little has been said about the professional role in all this. And as I speak as a professional, and in a very humble ways, to say that as a profession, perhaps we are complicit in all this. Even as I stand on one side of the table criticizing, on the other hand, I am the profession who executed it, who did it all, who made it all happen. So I do feel a bit concerned about talking about that. And what I will be talking about is really that small bit. A lot of experts are going to talk about other things. But the role of the profession in any kind of development, whether it is colonization, decolonization, new development, new India, whatever it is finally the professional who sort of has the vision, or shall we say should have the vision, and not the Prime Minister's dream, because it's in this particular project, I think it was the Prime Minister's dream that got implemented. And I often wonder, well, what were we professionals saying then? What were we doing? And in fact, we helped the Prime Minister execute his dream by destroying the profession. So, in a way, I'll be talking about our profession and the moral compass that we have lost. We may have all, over the years, become technically much more proficient, technically much more capable of executing projects. After all, we're in 2024 and we're doing amazing things. But somehow we lost the moral compass, and that's the thought I thought I would discuss. And I put it forward as three perspectives. Ultimately, the professional is supposed to ensure the public good. He of course designs a building, makes a beautiful building, safe building, a functional building, all that. But at the end of the day, as a professional, after all, we are not tradesmen, we are professionals. As a professional, we have a moral obligation to the public good. And I wonder, where did we lose this moral compass in the Central Vista about articulating the public good, about protecting the public good? So I have three perspectives, and these three perspectives come about because I wear three hats as a professional. I'm an architect, I'm an urban planner, I'm also a conservation professional. I do conservation work also. So I'll see it from those three perspectives as three professionals, as a planner, as an architect, and the conservationist. Because all three were involved, all three were complicit in the production of the Central Vista. Now, the objective is, as I said, the moral imperative, and somewhere along the way we have lost the way. And I propose that the Central Vista in fact throws light on that moral compass. So while we might say that a lot of things have gone wrong, but I think it highlights the fact that as professionals we have lost the moral compass. And the Central Vista brings it out very starkly. So this is a complex issue, and I thought that I would talk about a moral issue of a planner, of an architect, and as a conservation professional. And I say it because as three hats, I own responsibility to all three. As individuals, perhaps not. As individuals, we all have our point of view, and we all have we all say what we want to say. But as a profession, we seem to have lost it. Now, as an urban planner, let's say that we see urban planning as a scientific, expert-driven activity, and that's where we go wrong. It is a human activity. It's supposed to make cities for human beings. And yes, you need to have experts, you need to have engineers, you need to have all that, but we seem to have lost the fact that we don't talk about the people. And this comes out in the Central Vista very clearly because it was presented to the public for the first time on November 19, 2019 as a fait accompli. The whole thing was conceived. Its gestation, everything took place, we do nothing about it. Suddenly on November 19th, we see an ad in the papers that says, inviting tenders for the rebuilding of Central Vista. You say, hello, Central Vista, it's right in the middle of the city and we don't know anything about it. And I'm a professional who claims that I know a lot of professionals. I deal with the DDA, I deal with the government, I deal with all of them, knew nothing about it. And suddenly you see this ad in the papers and say, where did this come from? They worked it all out. All as though to say we're going to be invading Pakistan, and Pakistan better not know that we're going to be invading them. And one day we'll suddenly invade them and they'll decimate them. They'll decimate the public. But this fait accompli. There we were scrambling like, headless chicken, what to do, how to stop this, how to do that. And we made many mistakes, all of which they had calculated, all of which they had worked out very carefully and made sure that nothing materialized. They had competition and I won't go into it, but there are many aspects of this fait accompli that we objected to. Nothing materialized. Finally the project did happen. And it happened because DDA, the keeper of the city, felt that the public is an obstacle. They've been doing it for 50 years, since 1962, the master plan. They always dealt with the public as an obstacle. So what's wrong with this? Here they've thought that if we propose this project to the public, they'll object and the project goes. So better to do it as a war game and better to keep it hidden and spring it on them, and then it'll be too late. And that's exactly what happened, because massive amount of money, massive amount of pressure was done, and as he said, in 3 years, 4 years, we're going to build it. In a country like India, after 70 years, we know that nothing is built in 2 years, 3 years, But here it is, the project gets implemented so fast. So it's all been planned. So DDA considered it as the dialogue with the public as an obstacle. So there I say, what's happened to the profession? How do we as professionals, as urban planners, accept that fact? Of course, when the DDA invited objections, we objected, we were heard and completely disregarded. But that's the game. So should we not be focusing on the professional moral compass and say, look, planning cannot be seen purely as an economic, as a technical, as a engineering job. It is a moral job. It's about people. It's how do we keep people happy? How do we house people? And the tragedy came out very clearly soon after, once the COVID announcement was there. We saw millions of people leaving the city. And which professional said that, well, we were supposed to build a home, and these people are leaving home? Did it occur to any of us as professionals that we did something terribly wrong in the city planning, where people don't consider it a home, and yet we consider the city as our as the great new India? So the DDA's problem is there, and instead of defining what the public good is, it very proudly says we are going to implement the dream of the Prime Minister. What about the dream of the planner? The planner had the dream for 1962 master plan, 1981 master plan. All these were dreams. Planning is a dream at the end of the day, and we try and implement the dream. But suddenly the planner gives it up and says that no, we'll implement the Prime Minister's dream. So where is the moral compass of the profession? Where do the ideas of the professional dream go? So the DDA in fact destroyed the master plan to build the Central Vista. And if I could dwell on it a bit technically, it's not the right place to do it. I can show how step by step they have cut their own feet. They've destroyed the legal system, they've destroyed the regulatory system, they've destroyed everything. Now hereafter anything can happen if a leader says so. The planner is not important, it's just not, so what's the use of a master plan? What's the use of any plan when this thing happens? So urban planning as a public good was a victim. Now architects also have moral obligation. After all, modern architecture was built on a redemptive vision of how to get out of this terrible kind of architecture that we produced and produce modern architecture which had light, air, space for everyone. So it had a redemptive vision. So what's the redemptive vision that the architect expressed here? And all I can do is to quote Mr. Bimal Patel, the chief architect of this project, who says unambiguously that a project belongs to the client. Client here being Mr. Modi. So I'm saying, where is Mr. Bimal Patel? He's a very successful architect, very senior member of the profession. And he says unambiguously, I have no vision. It's the vision of the client I got to implement. So where is the moral compass of the profession as an architect? If he as a leader cannot articulate it, what can the other architects articulate? What can they do? They can only follow his example. Now it's a very complicated question as far as the profession is concerned. There's Bimal Patel's point of view. There's also Ayn Rand's Howard Rock's point of view, which is that the architect is the boss, architect has the vision. So we have two complete diametrically opposite positions of the architect. Both are wrong. Both are immoral. Both don't consider the people. Both don't consider the user. So both don't consider it as a human activity. You build architecture for human use, not for your personal aggrandizement as an architect, not for engineering marvels, not for all those things, but for making people comfortable. And no such thing was expressed in this project. Both perspectives are unwilling or unable to accommodate the central role of the actual user. And as an example, I'll just cite a slight example. In America, when the Black Lives the movement was taking place, the American Institute of Architects gave a public announcement that we are the problem. What's happened to the blacks, the incarcerations that happened in the prison, which made them more criminal oriented. So we designed the prisons. And because of us, we have produced the kind of people who we are now saying are the enemies and we've got to kill them. Black Lives Matter. So they put out a public announcement saying that hereafter we refuse to design a prison. And that was a professional point of view. They think that we don't know how to design a prison. We don't know how to we shouldn't be having prisons, but we don't know how to, when we do it, we make the situation worse. So there was an amazingly, shall we say, very inspiring view of the American Institute of Architects who said that, look, we are the problem, and until we resolve the problem, we're not going to be working for the government, or not for the making prisons anyway. So I'm saying that it's not as though that a profession cannot have a moral stand and cannot have a situation where they look at the problem and give a solution. Now, Central Vista has been designed as a hub of a government office. Ananya mentioned that this colonization debate is rather flimsy, but it was always the democratic center of the city. And now what the architect, Mr. Bimal Patel, has done is to make it a government enclave. So you can go there to take selfies and walk out. There's exactly what happens between North Block and South Block, which is again a public place. You're not allowed to go there. There are barricades, police stand there. You can go there to take a photograph of Rashtrapati Bhavan and get out. That's what's going to happen all over Central Vista. And everyone says how beautiful it is, how lovely it looks, look at how sensitively he's done it. But losing the moral issue that we made it into a completely government enclave, which will require security and will require to be monitored 24/7. And third is the conservation hat, and there, I think Naman mentioned a few issues, and incidentally that Rashtrapati Bhavan, we worked a lot on Rashtrapati Bhavan, and thanks to you people, we were able to convince the government to conserve that building, because there are so many proposals to do all kinds of things, and we produced huge amount of research to show that this building must be conserved. And it is being conserved if the two subsequent presidents have come, and each one sort of, you go to start over again. because the last president, I think, was educated enough to know that this is a historic building and must be preserved. But each new president has to be convinced that it's a historic building that needs to be conserved. It's not a colonial building. And we are now at the third iteration now to convince the third president that it should be conserved. But the idea of heritage being a problem is very clear in both the architect and the urban planner. Modern architecture and modern urban planning is based on the fact that the historic city is to be denigrated, is to be destroyed, is to be completely done away with. So with that kind of attitude towards the past, how are we surprised at Central Vista? So there again, I will come back to the profession saying that the profession of conservation has not been able to articulate its position to say that conservation is not something that is of the past. It is about designing the future. Because this thing about architecture being of the past and all has come about because of Archaeological Survey of India that says heritage is a few dead monuments. And somehow for 150 years we have learned to understand that, and we talk about heritage only as a dead monument. And Naman talked about Jeernodharan and all that, and these ideas just don't penetrate our modern architect or the modern urban planner. They always see that the past is something to be wiped out and a modern India has to be put. So again, the professional responsibility is there. The roots of it we have never got into, but the roots are very clear how we got into this position about denigrating the past, and how we are saying that the future depends upon economics and statistics and technology and etc. That is modern, but the past is not modern. So one gets into the whole idea of modernity. What is modern? Is modern a Western narrative? Can modern be an Indian narrative? Artists have shown it, dancers have shown it, musicians have shown it, not the professionals. And that's once again I say that the profession has let down the whole enterprise by not being able to articulate a modern Indian architecture, modern Indian urban planning, or conserve the past as a modern future. I debated this amongst the professionals. They keep claiming that I'm, some kind of a unreformed person that who cannot look at the future but can only look at the past. And even now they say, when a conservationist comes, they say, well, here's someone who's going to stop a project. And when in November 2019, the thing came out, we made out huge amount of appeals to the government saying that, look, we've been working on Central Vista for 10 years to develop it. Can you please talk to us? But of course, it was faith accomplished. They had already decided what to do. And we had said that how to modernize the Central Vista and keep history going. So I'll end there. I just want to say that these three professional failures is something that I'm concerned about. But of course, there have been a collective failure in many, many other levels. Thank you.